337, Republic, 1848, and Napoleon IH. Century 9. Quatrain 5. L261. Tiers asterisk doig du pied au premier semblera, et un nouveau monarchie de basse hall, backslash qui expis et lookies tyran occupera, du précedent courager le defaut. Translation. The third shall be a stepping stone to the throne, to a new monarch from low position to the top. He will as tyrant have taken a military post in Tuscany, and will seek to correct the defects of his predecessor. The National Assembly of 1848 shall serve as a foot to Louis Napoleon to step from private life into a conspicuous position. Lie had in his youth been concerned in the revolution of Tuscany, and purposed correcting the defect of his predecessor. Asterisk tiers, pour les tiers état. The third order now claiming to govern itself. T de basse hall, for de basse en hall elevated from a low to a higher and conspicuous position. Ex Latin, qui, he, who. The third estate will serve, as a toe of the foot to the first rank, a stepping stone to place. Two Lucca and Pisa stand for all Tuscany, where, in 1831, Louis Napoleon and Charles Bonaparte, his elder brother, had, with one cannon served by himself and a few Italian partisans, possessed himself of Civita Castellana, in the Pontifical States. Z. This might mean that he purposed to guide France better than Louis Philippe had done, or than in 4 years the Republic had done, or, which is most probable from his idts Napomoni etnies, to carry to completion the policy of his uncle Napoleon I. I cannot think it refers to Napoleon II, du de Reichsstadt. The entire application of the quatrain is neither very clear nor very important. The quatrain on Cavaignac, I think, is hardly made out satisfactorily, so I omit it. Century 8. Quatrain 43. L265. Parle decide asterisk de deux choses bastards, nep veu du sang f occupera le regni, backslash de don lecteur serent les coups de dards, nep veu par per pliera I insane. Translation. By the fall or ruin of two bastard things the nephew by blood will occupy the empire, in lectoire there will be deaths by arrow, the nephew will fold up his standard for very fear. By the overthrow of Louis Philippe and the Republic, two bastard governments, Louis Napoleon will now succeed to the throne, a nephew by blood asterisk Latin, decidium, a word not of classical usage, signifying ruin, or a fall. T Romance san, family. T Latin, regnum, empire. Lectoire, a town in France, in the department of Gers. Guernsey Res adopts the variant lectoire, which he says is a town in Gascony. The word occurs again, Center, VTL 12, and there he says it is a city of Guyenne. Lectura was the Latin name. It was a place of great strength, and picturesque, but, unless we can find it to be an anagram, there is nothing to connect the town in any way with the fortunes of Louis Napoleon. Of Napoleon Bonaparte, and, what is not generally known, he was the only one of the Bonaparte family born in the palace of the Tuileries. In battle afterwards at Lectoire coups de dards must be taken simply as battle, the nephew will furl his standard through fear. Writing in 1866, M. Le Pelletier particularly remarks that the epoch is left undetermined, and, as to the enigma of Lectoire, nothing can be known till the event has transpired. It may then be interpreted, he thinks, in some of the idioms known to Nostradamus: Greek, Hebrew, Latin, Celtic, Languedoc, etc. He considers the standard to present a further enigma, and asks what standard. This difficulty I do not quite recognize. The imperial standard that is adopted by him, whatever it may be. To furl a standard is to close and shut it up, so that no one will rally to it any more. It symbolizes that the cause it represents is brought to the ground finally, and that it is no longer flying. As to the word lectoire, we now know that, if it is to be interpreted at all, it will have to be found in connection with Sedan, the noblest reminiscence. Connected with which is that it was the birthplace of that great soldier and greater man, Marshal Turenne. He may well be called L'Aiguilleur de Sedan, whilst as appropriately may Napoleon the Little be designated as Tfdant de l'Aiguilleur, with that furled ensign, Chu ilpar per pliera ***. The word pliera, is of course, only an archaic transposition. Oi pliera. The line here can in no way be made to scan, being 2 syllables or 1 whole foot short. I would suggest it be read Nepveu, du sang, par per pliera I insane. After much difficulty and searching I have at last come upon 2 old maps, printed at Amsterdam by Bleu, the one dated 1620 and the other 1650, styled Les Souverainetés de Sedan. In both of these the embattled town of Sedan is given, as seated on the right bank of the river Meuse, whilst on the left bank is shown an extensive territory named Grand Tony and Petit Torquay. In another map it is given as Torcy. These maps give no indication of the points of the compass. But from another map, indicating them, the river bend on which the town is seated appears to run from east to west, and, if so, Torquay lies south or southwest of Sedan. In a more modern map it appears as Le Grand Torquay and is described as lying sur la route impériale de Mézières de Sedan. Evidently therefore we are entitled to place Le Torquay at Sedan. The French must determine for themselves, by their military bureau, whether the French camp was pitched in the meadows of Le Torquay, but nothing can alter the great fact, as now for the first time made plain, that the Nepveu du Sang furled his standard forever at Sedan or Lectoire, as the oracle gives it. Now Lectoire is the precise anagram, letter for letter, of Le Torcy, though the commoner spelling is without the second e, Le Torquay. If we are to reckon this as being a chance coincidence, my only further comment will be, that such chance as this is quite as miraculous as any miracle in the world could be. As regards the words Nepveu du Sang, there was a caricature very popular in France at the time of the candidature for the French presidency, consisting of 2 pictures. In one the Prince de Joinville was commending himself to the French people for election, having the young Comte de Paris by the hand, and saying, "I am the uncle of my nephew." On the other side Louis Napoleon presses his suit by pointing to a statuette of Napoleon Bonaparte and uttering the words, "I am the nephew of my uncle," showing how characteristically Nepveu du Sang designates Prince Louis Napoleon. He may almost be said to have chosen it himself as a cognomen. Century VIIL Quatrain 44. 1267. Le Procure, 5 Nature, Diogmian * de September I Nook du Chemin d'Est Orner, A Roy de Long Ami ETT O my Homti Doit Kane of our Fort de Pau Pros Turner. I propose here to make the meaning as clear as I can without a translation. Napoleon \\\\\. Le Procure, W \\Q natural offspring of the French Republic, Ogmian, will turn from the right road for 7 or 9 years before his fall. Le Pellidigre interprets otherwise. He says that the war in Italy began in the 7th year of the Empire, 1869, and from that date throughout the 9 following years he changed his policy. I think the line Ogmian has been explained already to be the symbol of the French Republic. The text CTYPC reads Et Amia. Ex my hower I, Le Pelletier says, is Denis Hompney, a man of low birth, and Roy de Tongue equals de Viel race. I prefer to read de Tongue Vi, and understand the King of Prussia, and my Hom I take to be the bivalve man, or Bismarck. Means that from 7 to 9 years before the end of his reign he changed his policy. That is to say, from 7 years previous to the close of his reign, when Charles Auguste Louis, du de Morny, died, i.e. in 1865, and even for 2 years previously to that, things took a different turn. De Morny no longer exercised active control, and his was the head that had guided all along. When he died, all ran to dist eruption. The ROI de Long and his friend E. Hobby, L.E. Pelletier states to be Victor Emmanuel and Garibaldi, one of long race and one of low birth, the tallow smelter. I think it is Frederick William, de Long and Bismarck, the bivalve man, which it becomes, if we read it as Viam. I have a great idea that Navarre is a misprint for Nepveu. Whether Fort de Pau may mean with his health re-established by staying at Pau or not, I cannot say. But, anyhow, I think that the two last lines are to be read together, and that he is to prostrate himself to the king and his friend. Louis Napoleon's whole reign must be represented as a failure. If you read it with L.E. Pelletier, mine makes it a failure during the last 7 to 9 years. My king and friend bring about the catastrophe far below the date that his will do. My emendation to L.E. Fictcus certainly clarifies the meaning. The explanation of Pau is not quite so comprehensible as I could wish. Had Ham been a variant it would have spoken for itself. The quatrain 53 of century 8, which I have already explained as the flotilla of Napoleon Bonaparte, M. L.E. Pelletier fixes as the ludicrous Boulogne. Pain after he became emperor, but I think he entirely fails in reading the symbols. Century v quatrain 8. L270. Cyril les fauviv, mort catched, de dans les globes, horrible espouvantable, de nuic de classe asterisk sit en poudre lasque, la site /feu, I ennemi favorable. Translation. Live fire, hidden death, shall be left in bombs, a horrible and frightful thing, by a band at night the city shall be fired with powder, the city seems on fire, it helps though intended to destroy. Fulminating mercury fauviv, in bombs in terrible explosion contains death hidden. The city, Paris, will be startled with powder liberated /I, loosed, by assassins by night. The city will seem on fire. But the enemy, in spite of himself, will prove favorable to Napoleon. This, of course, is Orsini's attempt of January 14, 1858. The next verse follows up the thread. Century v quatrain. Asterisk Latin, classis, band, K-class, by a band sick. It might be better here to render class as crash, K-zacre, brisure. Denuic la class, a crash by night. T Latin, area, chest, or dam. I Latin, demolitus, demolished. Latin, antec aptus, seized beforehand. Li Latin, dux, leader. Translation. When the peristyle is thoroughly demolished by the chief prisoner, the friend being taken before, a plot born of the woman, long beard and hairy face, then by cunning the leader caught will be executed. The peristyle, la grande arc, of the opera shall be completely shattered. Fiery, the friend of Orsini, the chief captive, is seized beforehand by Hubert, head of the detective service, who recognized him in the crowd. The plot was conceived in the secret lodges of the Demagogi de Dante, whose members wear the beard and hair long. Orsini, the leader of the whole, will be surprised astutely by the confessions of Gomez at the restaurant Bragi, whither he had fled, and, being taken, will be sentenced to death. I do not feel very confident as to this interpretation, but give it much as I find it in M.L.E. Pelletier. Century v quatrain lo. L272. Unti chef clique dans le conflict bkss, apert est cave ex voyancines mortibatra, de sang et plays et d'animus press, et secor par incognus decatur. Translation. The Celtic chief is wounded in the strife. Seeing death strike down his friends near the theatre, surrounded with blood and wounds and pressed by enemies, he escapes the 4 assassins, by unknown aid. The emperor, slightly struck in the eye by a fragment of glass, shall see his people strewn in death Latin, U7 UIS, the first. T Latin, cavia, theatre. Ex romance, incognus, unknown the 4 were Orsini, Fiery, Derudio, and Gomez. About the entrance of the Grand Opera. Pressed by the conspirators, 4 in number, he will receive unknown help, whether of angels or pure spirits, M. Le Pelletier cannot quite say. We now know that he had still to see Sedan, but it would be curious if pure spirits had interested themselves greatly to protect the cold-blooded murderer of the Champs de Mars and coup d'état. Century 6 Quatrain 4. I 273. Le second chef du règne d'Anemarque * par certifers feti il Britannique, faire despendre t plus de cent mille marques, vain exploiter voyage en Italie. The second of the Napoleonic race in power will cause England and Hanover to expend 100,000 marks in fortifications and war material. Fearing invasion after the Orsini effort, he will then exploit the Italian campaign, though vainly, as he will not reap the results he looks for. This corresponds so clearly with what happened that probably most will agree that it is a very remarkable forecast. Century 3. Quatrain 37. L. 274 Avant Iasot Rora Ison Pernani, Milan Prince H. Daigle par ambitious de Surs, Greek, Aviapate, as we had it before, VP 289. T. Frise, Hanover. I Latin, depend cray, to weigh out, spend. Le Pelletier calculates that the golden mark was equal to 250 gaiams, or 100,000 marks equals 10 million francs. To Latin, oralio, harangue. Romance, / 7.f//z.f, taken. Latin, Jesus, cut off. Murail antique par canons infanct, par foet sanque merci puricius. Translation. Before assault a harangue is pronounced, Lombardy is taken by the eagle, being cut off by ambuscade. An ancient wall driven in by cannon, fire, and blood, but little mercy shown. Before the declaration of war, the emperor will pronounce, January I, 1859, in the presence of the diplomatic corps, a threatening discourse against Austria. Lombardy, Milan, part for the whole, will be ceded by Austria at the Treaty of Zurich, October 17, 1859, Austria, an old wall, will yield to cannon, fire, and blood. Century v Quatrain 20. L 275. De ig * les Alpes grande armed passera un peu de veillet naestra monstra vapin, t prodigier et subit ex tournera le grantisquinque sun lu plus propin. Translation. A great army will pass beyond the Alps, a little before a prodigious scamp will come to power, he will drive the Grand Duke of Tuscany to his nearer home with astounding suddenness. In 1859 Napoleon III's army will pass the Alps. A little before a prominent scamp will have come to the front, who will suddenly and in a most startling *v, foot / iq exoduld. Plus Italian, 7 iappa, scamp. Percent Latin, subito, suddenly. / turnera, 4 il feritumor. 2 haxen, proping, at hand, near. Fashion drive the Grand Duke of Tuscany to seek refuge in Austria sun lu le plus Pirkpin. We have to note here that Nostradamus, whenever he emerges from the impassibility of the secret Stud, it is to exhibit a profound hostility to the genius of democracy and revolution. There is therefore little doubt but that the powerful epithet here employed of the monstre vapin relates to the RCD shirt Garibaldi. We have now reached the point which covers the last of the oracles of Nostradamus that commentary has yet been able to lay before the world with its meaning rendered transparent by the correspondence of interpretation with an event in history. The number of such correlations of occurrence with forecast falls immensely short of the number of the quatrains themselves. In fact, only about 151 out of 1,000. The rest give no scintillation as yet, but lie without sign of existence traceable, dead as a flint, till the iron stroke of time's heel shall develop the spark. Latet scintillula forcen. 1 or 2 presages and 2 or 3 sezzanes have been also resolved. Enough, we trust, has been opened up to show what a treasure house it is that we have entered into, how rich in curiosity, if in nothing more. What may still lie perdu in the bulky remainder of 850 it is impossible to say, whether, though unidentified, they have been realized already, or are yet to bud in the future. If nothing more be ever done with Nostradamus than this book gives, still the work must for one reason or other hereafter stand out as the most wonderful book of its kind that was ever written or printed in this world. It has no /y to go forth and take its chance, good or evil, of notice or of neglect amongst the mass of printed matter, largely rubbish, that deluges our life. It is certainly calculated, so far as it can secure any attention whatever, to severely shock the prejudices now prevalent amongst mankind. The half-educated will find it troublesome to read, and disturbing, perhaps, to thrnk about, whilst the scientific may even denounce it as a locust cloud of darkness medieval in its tendency. Undoubtedly it must have the effect that Nostradamus in his preface to his son, CP 50, says very graphically it will have. Que possible faire retirer le front que quelques uns. Although, as he says agam, the forecasts may be clouded, they will be understood by men of sense, and they will grow clearer as ignorance dies out, CP 54, which should be our care now. To all objectors I rejoin, gentlemen, investigate, please, all the points in question as searchingly as you can, find every fault in my work, and in that of the other Nostradamic commentators, that you can, expose all that is weak or elusive, wherever you find it to be so. Let us see, then, how far all the learning and acuteness you can bring to bear, coupled with whatever established prejudice, and its rancor at being disturbed in comfortable somnolency, can suggest, to overthrow what other men heretofore, and I now, have taken so much pains to bring together and give shape to. Consciously I have not set down a single word with any other desire than that the truth should prevail, and if your criticism can establish the opposite, I shall still repeat, let truth prevail. But I do not think you can do this, and if not, there is only one other thin, awkward piece of truth that has here got in the way of our old theories, and cannot be got out of the way again. To the really competent and candid reader I have nothing whatever to add beyond begging him to refer back to the closing words of my preface, as to him they will be found to contain my whole and referred to at p. 178. The genuine and spurious portraits of Cromwell are numerous to such a degree, that they may almost be called innumerable, for they can never be counted, as no one man can get at them all to reckon them up. Their main authority is said to depend upon the works of 4 artists, Lely, Cooper, Walker, Faithorn. Samuel Butler, the author of the ever marvelous Hudibras, is thought to have painted a likeness, but it counts for nothing, as it is not now to be identified as existing in any collection. The first named 3 are painters, the 4th is a great engraver. In all these, Mr. Frederick Harrison professes to discover singular resemblance Cromwell, p. 32, but considers that Cooper's is the most successful of them all. I find the first to be a most misleading statement, and one that may be disproved by anybody who will compare Cooper's likeness, as given in Carlyle's Cromwell letters, with the picture by Walker in the National Portrait Gallery. They differ in every particular, in character, feature, temperament, and conformation. Scarcely do they agree even in the ward. There is nothing to identify them as representing the same individual. Either Lely copied Cooper, or Cooper copied Lely, and they accordingly, of course, correspond with each other, but truth is too much sacrificed to flattery by both these courtly painters, for us to suppose that their work corresponds very accurately with the sitter. Such examples of Faithorn as are readily accessible in the print room at the museum convey no adequate idea of the man. Neither do they resemble Cooper, Lely, nor Walker's work. Their .sa profile print by Houbraken, an excellent performance wh.chs embarrassing as showing that both the chin and forehead receded eally. There is also a very peculiar engraving Goff Thomas Simon's medal, which is very beautiful as a work of V.E. If .equals s.e facial angle is simply villainous, with er mean diminutive eyes, and the dress almost clerical. The engraving from the Cooper at Sydney College gives the wart on the left brow instead of the right. From such discrepant things it seems to me next to impossible to derive any correct notion regarding the face F. Cromwell, except that the facial angle of the side face must receive TSZ phi pre, then that broad, solid face with the thick and prominent red nose, the heavy gnarled brow, with its historic wart, eyes firm penetrating sad, square jaw, and close-set mouth, scanty tufts of hair on lip and chin, long loose brown locks flowing down in waves onto the shoulder. His whole air breathing energy, firmness, passion, pity, and sorrow. Carlyle's fancy version S given below. This being derived from a falsity, must itself be false, but is it not somewhat curious that friends and foes of Cromwell should alike sit down contentedly before this admirably executed miniature of Cooper's without devoting a second OHTO? U.S. representative value as a portrait of the man in question? Asterisk stands some 6 ve feet 10 or more, a man of strong solid stature and dignified, now partly military carriage, the expression of him allower and devout gens Noroi. And delicacy on a basis of simplicity my for itutp complexion, bro need be, ilnhhgh. Brown hair and mustache are getting streaked w.they. If I rio uffi sent press Venice, no lovely to the man Millen's specs nor pretending obeso. Massive stature, big massive head of somewhat Leon May aspect, e. Full of all tremulous sesbiues and also, if need were, of all fierceness and rigors, deep loving hem grave, call them stem, looking from under those gay brows as one feiing sorrow, and yet not thinking it sorrow, think an tunly labo and end. Trademark or on the whole, a right noble lion face, and hero fac. Carlyle, Cromwell Letters, U, p. 435. Nero is. Its artistic felicity should be as nothing to the historical inquirer. Taken as a mere portrait, this Cooper is as valueless as Veronese's presentment of Alexander the Great, or as any fancy portrait of Oliver would be, if sent in by some skilled modern hand to the next May show at Burlington House. Our sense of surprise increases, when we come to remember that we possess an authentic original to go by, in the shape of a mask still extant that was taken at death. Historians draw up rigmarole pen and ink portraits of their own, but are all silent about this, or make only casual mention of it as the mask at the statuaries, just as though it corresponded in every particular with Samuel Cooper's exquisite figment. Romancists delight in colored detail gathered from history, and historians revel in romance when it saves them from searching into dry detail. In this case historical gossip slips in to illustrate the stringent veracity of Cromwell. When Lely was to take his portrait, he is said to have ordered him to be faithful in representing every blemish and defect, to paint warts and all, or he would not be paid. Lely knew what this meant, and acted accordingly. All portrait painters flatter, they must to secure a practice, but, they ought to select the best aspect possible, for so far it is what it professes to be, a likeness. Now the strong point with your court painter is, to throw in skillfully what is not there. In this Lely and Cooper have succeeded to admiration. Walker, in his several portraits, gives us another set of varieties. His picture in the Portrait Gallery Granger, Biog History, 3p 290 with Cromwell's son Richard as page tying on the father's scarf, has been finely engraved by Pierre Lombard. In this picture, which is a little wooden, we get an average-looking gentleman going to battle. A man we should have to look at 3 or 4 times before we should individualize him at all in the memory. Mr. Nobody riding to nowhere particular is the impression derived. Of the engraving, however, Evelyn says, and he knew Cromwell perfectly well, that it gives the strongest resemblance of him. He therein physiognomically discovers characters of the greatest dissimulation, boldness, cruelty, and ambition, in every stroke and touch. I can say nothing of this, for I have not seen the Lombard engraving. The picture does not convey the idea. 2a. How pliantly subservient art was in those days, is well illustrated, and another Cromwell engraving by the same Lemuel de Van Dyck, a Charles on horseback, from which he erased the face, and substituted that of Cromwell. The slender figure of the king had to do duty for the heavy-built brewer of Huntingdon. But times change, and we wa them. So Peter reinstated the king. There must be impressions of this turn-face print in its 3 states, for no doubt cop.es were sold at every stage. The king is dead. God save the protector. The protector is dead. God save the KMG. The dead lion is never so good for the crowd as the live ass, irrespective of the latter creature being far more representative. A quality much sought after in modern governors, there is a portrait of Cromwell affixed to Isaac Kimber's Life of Oliver Cromwell, which he published anonymously. Granger, 3. 297. This is pronounced in the letters of Mr. Hughes to be most like the authentic family pictures of Cromwell. Virtue engraved it in 1724 for Rappin's History of England, and when Granger wrote the picture was in the possession of Sir Thomas Frankland of Old Bond Street. I suppose this to be still in the hands of the Frankland Russells of Chequers Court, who also possess a plaster cast of Cromwell's face. By the courtesy of the family I have been permitted to examine this, but it seems to me of no value, and it has no history. We come now to the terracotta bust by Edward Pearce, which is in the National Portrait Gallery, said to be taken from life. Pearce was an artist in the 2nd generation. His father, of the same Christian name, was a painter, and assistant of Van Dyck. Our Edward was trained for a statuary, and became the pupil of Edward Bird. He also acted as assistant to Sir Christopher Wren, and is said to have built St. Clement Danes under him. He did a bust of Wren, for the theatre at Oxford, and also one of Newton. He died at Surrey Street in the Strand, and was buried at the Old Savoy. This bust of Cromwell was, to all appearance, modelled by him from a cast taken from life, and must therefore, as to measurement and bulk, be of life size. I am as kindly permitted by Mr. George Scharf, of the National Portrait Gallery, to take the dimensions of this bust by measurement, but practically they are not very useful, inasmuch as the head has a great abundance of short curly hair, which of course in terracotta becomes perfectly solid, and thereby increases the circumference of the head by many inches. The circumference, hair and all, at his brow is 2/8 inches. Nape of neck to frontal bone, where it unites with nose. Si breadth from ear to ear at level of the central holiofechuras nearas can be approximated 6. This last measurement is, I believe, correct, but it is a dimen. Zion that only a large forceps could take with perfect certainty. It is so small, however, that one feels sure that the other 2 dimensions must be very far from giving the true osseous formation, so that several inches will have to be allowed off them for the hair. Again, the measurement between the tip of nose and back of head, 95 inches, would also require that deductions be made for a wad of hair at the back. This measurement, when reduced, and coupled with the 3rd measurement given, indicates an undersized skull for a broad-built man of 5 feet 11 in stature. As for the physiognomy, the nose, though far from fine, is somewhat aquiline, and the best of all the features of the face. The forehead is low, ill-formed, and mean. The mouth firm, cruel, deceitful. The jowl and chin sensual and gross almost to brutality. It is the face of a man of low passions, possibly ambitious, but of great duplicity, of a low-bred type, the type as of one sprung from a lower stratum of society than his. History indicates him to have sprung from, and you may readily suppose that in exchanges of coarse buffoonery with the roughest trooper of his corps, he would have been quite within his own province and at home. His mother's portrait shows her also to have been a very masculine, coarse-featured woman. It is well perhaps to mention here a bust that grows in a letter to Granger in 1774, calls a masterly and spirited bust of Oliver Cromwell by one Bannier. It was then in M.R. Gosling's collection. He says it is like that engraving given in Rappin's History. I imagine it therefore to be a fancy rendering, and of very small historic value. The expert historians, and of course the general public together with them, are perfectly satisfied with the Cromwell presented to them by Samuel Cooper. I confess that I think it a most laughable presentment, and of quite impossible credence. I do not think Pierce's bust to be satisfactory, but I most certainly consider that it is the only likeness I have had the opportunity of examining that conveys even a hint of what be supposed to be the real appearance of the man. There is but one way now remaining to settle this question. It is very much to be regretted that, with so much pretense of a desire toward historical accuracy, we should have allowed 200 years to elapse without making the least attempt to settle this question. We learn from Braval's travels that at the old palace at Florence there is a cast preserved of Oliver Cromwell. The mold was obtained from Cromwell's face a few minutes after I'm decease, through the dexterous management of the Tuscan resident in London. This, or a cast from it, ought immediately to be secured for our National Portrait Gallery. A copy of it would cost very little in either time, money, or trouble to secure, and when secured 3 or 4 should be cast in bronze, and placed in different museums so that one fire could not destroy all of them at once. I feel almost sure that it will be found to confirm the bust of Pierce, as being more like Cromwell than anything else that we possess, and further, as Pierce's work is by no means a grand achievement in the sculptor's art, I should hope to find the Florence cast characteristic indications that are absent from Pierce's work. Grandeur of soul is incompatible with such a face as Pierce gives us. But I confess that I see no grandeur whatever that could be expressed by a man whose H1stor is that of Oliver. His base success the world may worship if it will. I despise success if it must be obtained by Cromwell's methods. I observe that the great in history are always mean in fact, and I well know that you must say to all the men who have been triumphant, let no probing moralist come near you. Pitiable and contemptible is the man who can envy the great in the greatness of their crimes. I do not expect that the cast, if procured, will make the reading any better for Cromwell, but, if it should, I am quite ready to give him all the advantage of it. At present I hold that the face is villainous, like the man. Duciter unco spectandus, gaudent omnes. Quilabra. Quis illi vultus erat? Nunquam, si quid mihi credis. Amavi hunc hominum. Juvenal, X 66. Still, love or no love, we have reached the end, and if we should confirm Pierce, the flesh and bones of the man thus revived will also confirm the epithets of Nostradamus, which erst induced me to enter upon this investigation. Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. John 4:19 Quod est antipedes, nemo spectat, celi scrutantur plagas. Cic, Divin, 2:13 This granted, a pig is nearest wisdom. Movitis ifi aroi, suns ticict chaosus. Witzius, Missal, p. 14. The best analogist is the best prophet. L'observation des analogies universelles et négligées, et c'est pour cela qu'on en croit plus à la divination. Levi, CKJT Amist Ayers, p. 216 Moit Youth, IRLXFFT/Sacri XCOJs, FV8 Capelfi 06 Fi, TT/AVTI 6 FRHARS Phi AV Tov, PROV 16. 10, LXX. There is divination on a king's lips, and judgment fails not in his mouth.